All right, and we are live. How are we doing tonight? Hey, so Rust Belt Kid got a hold of me earlier today. He's definitely still going to be here. It's going to be later on in the evening, but we're going to bring him in. He's going to talk to us all about agriculture, especially small time agriculture. How can guys start building a farm? How can they make that a viable situation? But the brother lives out there where he's surrounded by industry, he's surrounded by manufacturing. What can the U.S. do to make that a viable operation? So unfortunately, there were some things that came up just prior to the stream. So we're going to have him on in a few minutes. In the meantime, though, there were a few things I went through this week that I wanted to shout out. Primarily, it's going to be issues with Praise of Folly. He's been a guest here before, and he's had some fantastic output the past couple weeks. In particular, he's got two streams that I've greatly appreciated. The first one is going to be this over here, this why socialism failed in the US. If this isn't something that's on your radar, if you're not digging in out, not the meme of socialism, not the I appreciate Peter Schiff, but he's had some interesting takes, the whole Ron Paul revolution and all that. And now that I'm saying that, Peter Schiff we're talking about, isn't it? Land's sake. I'm going to double check that because God forbid that not be Peter Schiff. Who's the one that's in Congress? I can't remember. Let's see. Peter Schiff. Yeah. All right. Yeah, so he's the gold bug, always saying gold, gold, gold. But he would go down there during the whole Wall Street protests and all that, saying, I am the 1%, trying to get kids involved with that. And so that's his deal, and it is what it is. I think Folly actually came in and he made a lot of good points on sort of the working class and what goes on with socialism, and in particular, why it didn't take root here in the U.S. There are some, shall we say, some interested people who made sure that that was never a viable American opportunity through different acts within integration and the power structures that individuals would have had access to had they socialized, which you see with UAW and some of the bigger unions. And so there was enough momentum there that there was an itch for labor and unified labor. Ultimately, though, it didn't take root in the same way that it did in other countries. I would really appreciate it's Todd does a good job in this one of digging into the U.S. and figuring out why we weren't able to get it going here. But I would also be super curious to have him go in there and figure out how does this compare to some of the continental issues, especially if you start jumping into say something like the Iron Guard. How was that able to take root? Mostly in socialism is a little bit more, maybe a little bit more nuanced than the Iron Guard. But it would be curious too to see, was there arguably the leaders for socialism in the States were stronger than a lot of the output in Europe. But was it a matter of, and he goes into this a little bit in his stream, but was it a matter of the American variety of socialism being too focused on labor and on social ideas rather than the people that it was supposed to be serving? Is that part of the reason that socialism didn't take place here in the States, even if we had leaders that could potentially argue the structure and the application of socialism in the States better than what they had over in the continent or over in the UK? So great stream right there. The other one that he did here recently was this one on Conan, or why Howard's work isn't up to snuff. Now, this one, at the very least, was quite fun, and it's going to give you a lot to think about. I would love at some point for Todd and I just to go and riff a little bit back and forth on what's being achieved in pulp, what's being achieved in Conan in particular. It is you can come at Conan at least two different ways, maybe potentially more, probably more, but at least two different ways. And the one would be a traditional reading of the work, and the idea that there's supposed to be a continuity there, or at least a cohesiveness within the world, within Howard's pulpy vision and what he's accomplishing on the page with Conan. Now, I would also make the argument, I think, kind of riffing off top of my head, working through this. I think you could also make the argument of a sort of existence, within Howard. Excuse me, guys. I got something going on. All right. Yeah, we're good. I had to check something out on another screen. So I think you could make the argument that Conan is an archetype, is a recording of oral history within his world. Now, I do think I'm trying to remember explicitly some of the parts of Todd's stream. I think he might have actually addressed this at one point, citing some different parts within the canon that said, no, this is supposed to be the written account of what went on. So I might be a little bit off on that. But if we tie in sort of the idea of, what is it, Marcionism? I think that's the idea. Yeah, that originated. So Marcionism, it's the idea. Let's see. So Marcionism preached a benevolent God of the gospel who sent Jesus Christ into the world as a savior, who was the supreme being, different and opposed to the malevolent demiurge or creator God identified with the Hebrew God of the Old Testament. So what Todd did do in his stream was a really good job of jumping into the lack of divinity, and especially the lack of cohesive divinity within Howard's work. And so he goes in there and he's able to show a lack of divinity on the part of Conan, a lack of divine presence or operation on the part of Conan. So therefore, we struggle to identify with what Conan is doing in his world. But I think you could make an argument in there, not Marcion in that it's actually focused on any divinity per se, but a Marcion idea in that what is being presented of Conan throughout the canon is an idea and an identity that is fulfilling the objective as it needs to, not as it actually is. And so within that, Conan can be a stand-in for a character and an identity that needs to be as weak or as powerful as he needs to be in any given situation. Now, I'm coming at this primarily from reading way too many issues of the old Marvel comic books of Conan. Through a different series of events, I had access to hundreds of, maybe that's an exaggeration. I can't remember what the original print run was on the Conan comics, but I had access to a ton of them as a kid. And even within the comic books, it was blatantly obvious that there was a through line that would go in this sort of like Todd talks about, this heightened masculinity, this caricature of Conan. But what wouldn't happen is any sort of major continuity within the comic books. And so that, I think, could be a fair play on it. Let's see. Oh, hey, Midwit's in here. Fantastic. How are you, brother? Yep. Well, I will be looking forward to you catching this replay and having any thoughts on it. But yeah, it I think it's some good thoughts here on Conan, and some good thoughts on why it doesn't make sense. But I also wonder, was he trying to make sense? It's a question. Todd does a really good job of fleshing things out and looking at a variety of sources. And to be fair to him, and to really show my hands and take him away from the vest, I have read a Solomon Kane story and a Conan story, and then, like I said, a bunch of the comic books as a kid, and so I'm familiar with the ideas that Howard was running around with. But to actually dive into the canon and be experienced with that's one thing I'll never fault Todd for. He's very well versed in any of the subjects that he chooses to post and give his thoughts out on. So I appreciated that. That's a little bit of what's been going on this past week. Now, another one as we're digging into all this, and again, like I said, Rust Belt's going to be here about 9:30. What'll probably happen is I'm going to end up jumping in and editing this in post, which is something I never do with these streams, but it'll be a good time. See if we can't cut out some of my dead air, so to speak. At some point, we might actually put this on pause just for a minute while we end up waiting for Rust Belt Kid to get here. In the meantime, let's see if I can get set up. One of the other things that really caught my eye this past week was Spader. And he had written... Let's see, give me just a second here. Replying to somebody. All right. So let's jump in. Spader had written about everybody's favorite man, Mr. Joel Berry. And I don't know if I can... Excuse me. I don't know if I can get across how sick and tired I am of seeing Joel Berry. I think it's an absolute wasted time. I frankly need to do a whole stream on how Joel Berry was able to kick us all off the Tiger and cause us to act like morons. The man's not going to learn. Now, I will defend one person in particular on this. Give me just a moment. Sorry, I can't imagine any of y'all actually want to watch me drink anything. So, the one person that I will defend on this, because this is just part of his shtick and what he does, is Dave the Distributist. He's very good about going in with these knuckleheads and talking with them and trying to start at the most base level, hear them out, steel man their arguments, and try and lead them down the path. And just say, hey, here's some things maybe we should think about. Dave's good at that. Fair enough. What blows my mind, though, is a lot of good guys just taking what Joel posts and just throwing it down like it's worth even considering. I do not understand that, but different strokes for different folks, I guess. So let's see. Let's see if we can just jump in here, find exactly where Spader was going with this. I want to say that's who it was. Let's see. All right. This exactly. Why does James Lindsay or Joel Berry deserve any attention in the discourse at all? If somebody could explain that to me, we'd be golden. This is something I've been complaining about for months because I don't get it. Why take the cognitive functioning and even allow this man in there? He's been proven multiple times. One, going back to the distributors, not to act in good faith. He goes on there. He has a polite conversation, sort of hear each other out, and then he wants to jump in the next day and talk about how evil Dave is and his chauvinistic ideas and his woke right identity. Not cool, not polite. How are you going to do that? If that's where you're going to go, why weren't you calling Dave out to begin with? Why weren't you saying, "Hey, I'm not aligned with this. I think your message is garbage. I can't believe I'm platforming you right now." Why isn't that what Joel was doing? Well, of course not. He's on somebody else's channel and he just decides to play nice. It was gross. Uh, what's his nuts? Daggum Black Horse had a good call out on that. Anyways, Spader's in here. Why do they get any attention? No one is putting a gun to your head, forcing you to quote tweet these or other loser gatekeepers. You can just step over them. It's that simple. It's that simple. Since January or February, at least February, I've been over here asking, did this man single-handedly kick us off the Tiger? Who cares what Barry has to say? Honestly, it blows my mind because we're not even engaging. And I think maybe that's another part too. Everybody knows that it's a waste of time to engage his arguments and to try and build off of them and to compete with them. Those days are done. The Vosh, I'll lump Barry right in there with Vosh or anybody else. But any of these knuckleheads that can't work through an argument and argue in good faith, why even bother? Why deal with this? Why deal with, you can have nuance in some of the red pill ideas and the conversations there. Sure, hash these things out. But if you are starting at A and somebody else is starting at Zimbop and it's not even in the same alphabet, why bother? Especially when it's not even arguments that are taking place. It's just quote tweeting and engagement and X pennies, Twitter microsense engagement baiting. I think I'm beating a dead horse here. I think it's plain and clear. This whole Joel Berry nonsense is simply that. It's nonsense. There's no reason to keep quote tweeting and bringing the guy up and letting him kick you off the Tiger. Just jump over. Just step. Anyways, I'm going to let this stream run here for a minute. And let's see. Barry and Lindsay only need to be mocked and ridiculed. Yeah. It just feeds them, says Spader. Absolutely. Spader is almost always dead on his takes. Definitely worth a follow if you can get in there. So, having said all that, I'm going to let the stream run for a minute. I'm going to go and do a few things. Rust Belt should be on here, in a few minutes. And then, again, we're going to be jumping into ag. We're going to be jumping into industry, and we'll go from there. All right, gents. See you in a bit. All right, unmute myself. I think. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Good to go, dude. How are you?
Good. Hey, thanks for holding down the fort for so long. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. So I just appreciate you were able to get on here. Let me figure out if I can work in a new system here. There we go. Okay. So, what is it? I mean, actually, let me walk it back. Introduce yourself. Tell us why we should even care who you are and what it is you do.
Well, you don't have to care who I am. That's fine. Rust Belt Kid. Real name is Jack. I work at a manufacturing facility in Michigan. I work in operations, and I also farm part time on the side. Just started that last year. So I guess, yeah, the factory is called Gator Bar. We make a composite rebar, and that's the real short and dirty.
Yeah, perfect. So I will say, I was first introduced to you because I think it was your Christmas post or whatever with the wife Jack.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
then yeah. So then I think I had made some offhand comment about like, oh, I saved the star for you. I was like, doggone it. Every time I go anywhere halfway viral, it says a stupid reply guy. But it works out because you are doing a fair bit. Let me walk it back. So if you took you and me and you sort of did the opposite, my focus is on it's on farming now, but that's post military and having done that stuff. And so now
Okay.
everything goes into the farming. And so it was serendipity to see that you're doing the farming stuff on top of all the manufacturing and all that. And then there's a longer story there about the Midwest that I'm not going to get into, but
Yeah.
I like seeing. Well, are you? I don't want to go too far. Don't want to dox you or nothing, but you're a Youper, yeah?
Yeah, I'm a Youper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Transplant, but yeah.
Oh, are you? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not. I was from the Rust Belt. I guess you could figure it out if you probably go read my post. But yeah, I guess I don't have the handle for no reason at all. But yeah, originally I was from Illinois, and
Okay.
um, I moved to the Upper Peninsula when I went to college, and then I ended up marrying a girl here locally, and yeah, so that's how I got up here. I like where I grew up. I guess is kind of right on the line of kind of where the corn belt meets the
Yeah.
Rust Belt. For example, he worked at a wire factory. Um, my dad welded, but you get west of where I grew up, and you're firmly in, the prairie, I would say, and you get east, and you're in Chicago, so kind of right on that line.
Well, and that's so I'm on another screen right now. I'm trying to pull it up, and that like any state can be divided into 3 or 4 different groups within it. I mean, the Midwest, I would say, has 3 solid. No, let's walk it back. It has 2 solid groups. It has the Great Lakes Midwest, and then it has the plains in the northwestern Midwest. So your Dakotas, or at least eastern
And and
sections,
then
and
and then
people get
almost and then almost the Ohio River Valley, right? That's kind of
so that I was actually going to hit on that one because that's a funny place, right? Let's see if I can pull this up here. Uh, okay. So if we jump in here, and it's, people got to decide for themselves what they believe or whatever. But if you, this is solidly Midwest, even parts of Canada, I would argue. But then if we jump over here, once you get south of Columbus, I
Hmm.
say you're in with river people.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Most of
disagree.
most of southern Indiana and even parts of Illinois, you're in with river people because that grouping of people down there, all throughout Kentucky, and then coming down this way, it's a different group of people. Unless maybe, I guess maybe you could throw Louisville into the Midwest, but if it is, it is the southernmost tip of the Midwest.
Yeah, you
But
you know Kurt, Kurt Steiner.
I feel like I should know the name.
He's like a Midwest historian. I had him on one time, and I liked his definition. He said the the Ohio River to the south and the Missouri River to the west, and you just draw that right and everything in between. Um, I like that definition quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if we want to be, if we want to get picky, we can. But I mean, there's with you saying Rust Belt and all that too. I mean, I think there is out there towards what on the eastern side of Ohio, right there on the tip of Pennsylvania, and then even a little bit of Dagum on the eastern side of Erie in New York. I think you can even count a little bit of New York, maybe weekend towns from Buffalo or so. But that's I understand if people don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, I think if you're gonna throw, you kind of have to throw Ohio and PA in there because of the steel,
Yeah.
and then if you do that, I guess you kind of have to throw Western New. Or you don't have to, but you kind of could throw Western
Right.
New York in there, right? Because it's the same bubble as Ohio and PA almost.
Yeah. Well, and all three of those are a good. They're sort of a good segue into what we're trying to get to tonight, and that's the idea of manufacturing and agriculture. And especially so what we're not seeing on here because I put in Great Lakes. I mean, if I put in the Midwest, then we're going to throw in Iowa and all that, and the heavy row cropping farming areas. But that's not really what you're hitting on when you talk about ag. What's your idea? What are you trying to encourage people and build on?
Um, well, I guess sm- the thing I'm personally most interested in is what would it take to put small farms back on the landscape at a scale that's feasible to get into. So we're probably talking about 100 acres or less. This scale has a historic precedence, basically until the farm crisis, right? So from the beginning of our country to the crisis, you had many farms operating at this. Maybe we'll go up a little bit, but 20 to 200 acre scale, and growing real healthy food. And I absolutely understand why there's big farms. I'm not gonna play dumb or like I don't get it. I get it. Um, but if someone wanted to start out, how would they go about it? And I don't have all the answers. I don't know. But that's what I'm most interested in. And then using the historical precedents that's been set by generations before us to help paint a picture of what that might look like.
Okay, so what would that look like? What is the end goal? What are we achieving on here besides homesteading, feeding our families? What are we trying to achieve, and how are we making it viable?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out because I think that is a good distinction. I think homesteading is cool and neat, maybe not practical for a community. It even, but you know what I mean. Like there has to be some level of scale if we're talking about feeding a nation of 330 million people, right? So you can't expect everyone, obviously, to operate at that scale. The goal here is to have resilient communities in rural America that have healthy people, right? And it doesn't have to be just rural America. We can be selling that food into urban markets. Um, you can probably hear my kid crying. I'll scoot over
Oh,
here.
you're fine. Yeah.
Um, you know what I mean? So it's like uh, we've I you probably anyone that might listen to this is going to know like the realities of a homestead, right? Or the shortcomings, one might say. There's a ton of good things, right? But there's also
Yeah.
shortcomings, and it's ignorant to pretend there isn't. But then as a country, we also have on big display the opposite end of the spectrum, that is 1,000-acre row crop farms that grow corn and beans, structural incentive to only grow those things, and a food
Right.
system that's also structurally set up to accept those things as inputs.
Mhm.
And we are now kind of living through the consequences, both with health, with rural livelihood, and probably a handful of other things that I'm, not that aren't coming to mind right now. But the mega row crop acreage farms, right? So
Yeah.
what's the in between, and what might that look like? Because to me, there's very little people operating in that space, that 20 to 200 acre space, and what opportunities are there, and probably we're gonna find out some things that are wrong too, that we're gonna crash and
Yeah.
burn. But how can we make a scalable yet healthy and resilient medium-sized farm?
Yeah. Yep. So I will to give you a little bit of background on me and just maybe add some more to this picture. I've got about 30 acres that I farm, and about 20 of that's in pasture, and so it's running pork and it's running lamb, and then the other I've got two market gardens on it, and all of this leads to us doing having a farm shop on the farm and then selling direct to consumer from there because 30 acres isn't going to produce near enough row crops, but then to actually scale where all you do is take 2 loads of cattle to auction each year, or to actually run to the grain mill or the brewery or wherever you're selling your grain, you can't do that on 30 acres. And if people are going to start, so one of the frustrating parts for me is I will see people talk about, I just want to live on a 400-acre beef farm or whatever, and it's, first of all, you don't understand the land costs, you don't understand the infrastructure and just the general capital you need to get your pay to play card, because at that point you still have to continue on the hay, on the seed, on, you're big on regenerative agriculture. I am on crop rotation and all that, but excuse me, on livestock rotation. But you still need your electric netting, or you need the labor to actually get these things done. And so I think you're right in that the idea that we had in the 20th century, and what we miss out on is the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where all the small acreage and diversified farms who either weren't able to or didn't want to make the jump to heavy conventional, heavy fertilizer and synthetics and all that, they went bankrupt, they sold out and said it wasn't worth doing, or they just stayed small. And so now our picture is 400 plus acres, but you talk with these guys and they're living on operating loans, and their margins are just as small as the guy who's on 30 acres, 100 acres, 50 acres. Um, it's just that there's more zeros,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
that's not in the actual net income. That's in the operating expenses and in the gross income.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think you're right. It's going to be interesting to see if people can make it work, because that's the only way it's going to work, is if they can figure out how to crack that nut of small acreage.
Yeah, so I didn't know that about you. I am interested. I think you, I think you brought up a good point, and it's been a little bit overdone by the farmers market crowd, and I don't obviously have anything against the farmers market
I
crowd,
do.
but the going direct to consumer. I mean, it sounds like we're really similar, right? I have 20 acres on farm store,
Yeah.
and I think obviously, I'm sure you would too, but pretty quickly,
Yeah.
exactly that. There is a minimum pay to play, or however you want to call it, infrastructure if you're going to play the game with the big dogs. That frankly, if you come from outside of farming and you don't have assets to leverage against, you're probably never going to get there, unless you come from tech, or some asinine high paying field. Um,
If you won the Bitcoin lottery.
Way that puts you in the direct to consumer bucket. So I
Yeah.
think one thing that's underexplored is outside of farmers markets, what does direct to consumer even look like? And there's a few people doing interesting work, but like literally just guys like you and I have to go experiment a little bit and figure out what works, what doesn't, and we're gonna have to share that information, because it's like a whole big ball of wax, and there's so few people doing it that and if that's where the game is going to be played going forward, I think it's not sexy, unfortunately, right? Like marketing and sales, and at least not to me. But really, that's a code that needs to be broken or explored, or however you want to put it. But there's I was thinking about this. Here's one thing, okay? Even as you podcast or you hear, I guess that's my main form of media I consume is podcast. Even all these people that are raising, doing diverse crop rotations, or they're doing ultra high density grazing or whatever, so
Yeah.
many of these people are still turning around and selling into conventional markets.
Yeah.
And for one reason or another, like me, it's location, right? For a lot of people, it's going to be they just can't afford to. Um, I mean, I can't afford to either, right? But I literally don't have a conventional market nearby. So,
Yeah.
so now
Now,
what do I do?
dig into that if you would, so people get an idea of what we're talking about when we're saying conventional markets.
So by that, I would mean like for grain, I would just mean an elevator, right? So
Yeah.
most of the corn, bean, wheats, canola, whatever, that's going to be grown America, is going to be an elevator, where you can, within reason, just show up with your semi load of grain.
Yep.
You can run it across a scale, and they're going to maybe do a quick inspection on that grain, and they're going to pay you by the bushel, for what ran across that scale. Now, I'm less familiar with livestock markets, but my understanding is more or less, you show up to the sale barn, you unload your 50 steers, whatever you have, right? And there's a handful of buyers there from a handful of either feedlots or meat
Yep.
packers, and they're going to be bidding on your cattle or sheep, or whatever you're raising,
Yep.
and that meat's going to be, it's your hands are wiped clean. You're done with them. You get your check. And I guess maybe the point of what I'm trying to get at there is you almost have a guaranteed buy. You may or may not like the price, but you have a guaranteed buy. you know, 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
So now if we talk about our situation here, I guess probably our nearest grain elevator would be Green Bay area ish.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about 4 hours. And, you know, to be honest with you, I don't even know where one would go. I don't know our nearest livestock auction, probably
Okay.
Green Bay area ish, right? So another 4
Yeah.
hours. I don't have the capital to invest in a semi or a grain trailer or a livestock
Yep.
trailer. Probably not going to for a very, very long time, if ever. So kind of right away, even if I did have 500 acres, which obviously most people aren't going to have, let's say even a 40, right? You get a 40.
Yeah. Yep.
You want to, you know, do whatever, pick your, how are you going to get rid of that product? Where is it going to go? And
Yeah.
yeah, I guess you can take it from there. But the big thing is the advantage some people have. Let's say you live in Illinois or you live in Kansas. If you want to experiment and mess around, maybe with some regenerative stuff, that's great. That's awesome. At the end of the day, those people, if they can't find a buyer for their premium meat, if nothing else, they could take it to the sale barn and they could have
Yes.
that guaranteed sale. For people in these kind of more obscure areas, maybe the Mountain West or New England, or the Northwoods, like I am, give those people food, right? But the farmers there aren't going to have that guaranteed backstop. So what does the marketing program of those people look like? And I think that's really the big question.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it strikes at two different issues, and the one is food supply for the country, and having access to beef that's not from Argentina, that's not from the UK, lamb that's not from Australia, and then it's also the other part is that can Americans anywhere in the country actually uh, have some sort of viable. See, I'll be honest too and say that I think putting the label on a farm and saying that that has to be your sole source of income is limiting, and I think that's unfortunately an idea that does come in. Like, it would be great if that was everybody's sole source of income was farming, but if we're going to do it on these small acreages, I think that that could be a big part. Maybe it's the biggest piece of the pie, but I don't think it can be all of it. Certainly not for the first decade or so after you start. I mean, like any other business, it's going to take time to build it up. And so it's interesting seeing folks start dealing with this, because my hope, let's come from a different angle, in that over 50% of farmland is going to change hands in the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And that my hope is that somewhere in there, whether it's tech guys and lawyers that are just bored out of their minds at this point and are able to either go remote, lighten their load, or have cash piles that are able just to grab something and go wherever they want and say, I'm going to be a farmer. Or more likely, it's going to be guys that are either working in manufacturing, working in some sort of job that potentially they can get factory work, or they can have some sort of work that they can just leave at the office at 4 o'clock at night, leave at the office on Friday night,
Yeah.
and then dedicate those nights and those weekends to the farm, so that at the very least the farm is paying for itself, and hopefully more than that. Hopefully it does become ultimately a business, but also I think we got to scale ourselves back and say, is this a business because it's actually viable, or is this a business because it pays for everything? It pays for my vacations and all that. And I think, like, let's temper our expectations. And I don't want people to think that farming as failure. I just want them to come in with open eyes and actually have an idea of what they're accomplishing, because it's as simple too as stocking rates. We've talked a lot about row crops, but stocking rates on 20, 20, 30, even if you get 100 acres, depending where you're at in the country, that 100 acres might only raise 5 head of cattle. That
Yeah.
might pay for your operations, but it's not going to pay for your mortgage on top of your operations. And so there's all these variables that we have to figure out. What are we willing to do in the midst of that, and what is viable? Is 33% on top of operating expenses, is that good enough for you to say, oh, I have a farm? Or yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but the right guys, they have to hear this and they have to work through it all. And Salatin is great, but Salatin also has how many acres? And
Yeah, it's almost it can be taboo from both sides of the spectrum, right? It can be taboo from the aspect of, and they're right in a lot of ways, but you'll hear row crop guys talking about how, you hear this all the time: if I had to start the farm today from scratch, I could never do it. And they're probably right. If they're farming, they are probably
yes,
100% accurate. They have 100 years of equity that's gotten to them to where they are. On the other side, you have, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, you have YouTube farmers who are telling people they can make a living on a half an acre. Okay, so you kind of have like the side where it's like, don't get into it, you can never do it. And then you have the side, and that's not realistic. And then you have the other side that's like, oh, get into it, everything's happy, go, rainbows and sunshine on a half an acre, which is also not realistic.
I won't play in the mud, but I have a list of YouTubers that I will not recommend. And that
well, exactly. And I think it really only takes growing a garden to figure out, or a little experiment of chickens at home or something to kind of figure out that the reality is somewhere in between, right?
That's the longer story too, in that I bought into the Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead for it.
Yeah, well, I bought into the YouTube idea and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go start a farm." And at this point, I'm nearly a decade into it, and it has grown to a decent sized scale. It pays for itself and then some, but I'm not living off of it. And YouTube was a big joke. It was a big lie, and so it's taken that in. And and of course, I came at it, and my family had left on both sides, mom and dad's side. They were both at least, depending on how you count, 3 generations off the farm. And so I come out here, and so my learning curve is like that, just straight vertical. And YouTube quickly got surpassed by me throwing my hands up and say, I'm going to the local welding shop and I'm going to ask them what they think about this. Or let me just go stand at the door at the feed store and say, hey, you got any ideas about this?
Yeah.
And so, that's only a slight exaggeration. At this point in the county, I have different folks I could talk to. And I've got a hay man, and which that jumps into it too. I mean, for me to raise all my own hay, you start making choices. I could raise my own hay, but then that would be limiting the amount of stock that I carried. And so then I would have less stock to sell at the shop, which is fine, but it's, there's no solutions, only daggum consequence. Nah, what is it? Whatever Soul said. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing, because I was probably pretty risk averse parents, and so you're talking about having a day job and getting into it. My wife bought a duplex when she was like 18 or 19, fresh out of high school, and fixed it up with her dad. And I would have never gotten into rental properties. And I know there's a certain connotation of maybe rental property people online. But these either just a straight up day job, we can do that, or and kind of what we've done over the years is that the one turned into two, and then maybe it went back to one again, and then we've kind of like slowly worked that one investment into leading up to buying our farm. Actually, we had kind of just gone through the main peak of the COVID spike, like a real estate spike, and we were really looking for acreage, and it just felt like I had written probably 100 letters and I had chased every real lead, and it just felt like we were never going to get there. And all of a sudden one day, this farm popped up on Facebook. Luckily it was only on Facebook. I saw it, and I messaged the guy that night. I was like, hey, I'll buy this, if you take it down right now, take it down right now. And I'll pay you the listing price. But I didn't have the money for the listing price. Luckily, we had a property that we could sell to, and I had to sell that property quick to get it done in the time required. But the bottom line is, if you're like just always trying to come up with the cash or even down payment in the mortgage, either just with your day job or just off the farm, like, you can't be a purist, I guess is what I'm getting at. And luckily, my wife back when had started getting into long-term rentals, not short-term rentals. We're not that greasy. But and so we had that, and we just sold it. Outside investment to help secure a farm is another thing that's not talked about enough, because you kind of started bringing this up earlier. We're not going to get there in the traditional ways. If we want more people on the landscape in rural America, the traditional ways have done exactly the opposite, right? They've moved people off the farm. So you're going to have to come up with a little bit non-traditional ways to get in. And if that means buying a duplex when you're 19, or it means, selling t-shirts online or whatever, you're going to have to come up with something.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Greg Judy, he talks about this a lot, and the idea of like doing lifetime farm leases and all that, which is cool if you can make it work. But the other part is, I mean, if you're a kid in Ohio or Alabama or whatever, maybe you're keeping property in the suburb, and you're driving out to the 10 acres where you've got goats or whatever it is that's getting the ball rolling on that. So I don't know. I think the whole creative idea is what it's going to take over the next several decades. But that's a good segue into, you don't just focus on ag. You also focus a lot on manufacturing. And is it fair to say blue collar jobs? How would you phrase it? Rust Belt jobs?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
okay.
I mean, my job is certainly not high paying. So yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Of jobs of great importance that have been cast aside, right? For
okay. Yeah.
That's I guess how I think about it.
So with that one too, I mean, let's dig into that, because you have posted before about jobs in manufacturing that are still available and frankly still need bodies, but like you just said, are cast aside. How does that work? How are you aware of this, and what are you bringing attention to?
I guess a lot of the things I'm most familiar with are just going to be in a traditional factory setting, because that's where I work. for better or worse, manufacturing has become synonymous with machining. And I think that's cool. Machining is definitely cool, but I actually don't know that much about machining. And I wish that people were maybe able to talk about other forms of manufacturing more. Um, so, uh, there's a lot of tariff talk right now, and I'm not a tariff expert, but I think one, the reason I bring that up is one very common retort that you're going to see constantly is um, like I'm not going to go work for $20 an hour, and the issue I take with that is that almost everyone I know uh, working like in manufacturing, I have a brother-in-law that works in manufacturing. There's obviously everyone at our shop. Um, one of my brothers is I guess manufacturing adjacent. Um, these are guys that have good, like pure middle class jobs that I would say are probably uh, just I hate to throw dollar numbers around because every based on where you live and stuff, but in the $20 mark, right? Let's just say that. I think so few people talk about the potential for advancement, and frankly, because there's so few there's so few people in the country working with their hands, um, that I've seen a lot of guys go from summer help as a high schooler to the main Mr. Fix It. Like that's our current like mechanic at our shop, our facilities manager, um, was three. He was a 17-year-old high school kid that hung out with the wrong crowd. And 3 years later, he's like the Mr. Fix It. I don't actually know what his job title is, but you get what I'm saying, right? Is yep. So when you hear some desk jockey say, I'm not going to work for $20 an hour. Who would work for $20 an hour? Well, I can guarantee you there's despite the big, everyone puts their suit and tie on and logs on Twitter and says they make six figures. There's a lot of people that are just fine working with $20 an hour, especially once they understand there's pretty big. I won't sugarcoat it. There's oftentimes on the production floor, there's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of people that are there because something else fell through, and I don't know how to say that nicely, but they're maybe not the best workers, right?
Yep.
But that means if you're a good worker and you can lead those kinds of people, I think there's huge opportunity. And so to dismiss these jobs is a pretty big oversight. It also is, to me, the only true sustainable middle class, right? I think we have a middle class now that kind of gets, maybe social media managers or marketing people or whatever. I think we're going to find out really quickly that those things are very temporary.
Right. Yeah, and so that's a good intro too. One of the big dust ups that somehow you got caught up into, which displays all this, was Scott Greer back in February.
Oh yeah,
which was just stupid. There a lot of my mutuals or whatever. They're like, "Oh, who's this Rust Belt kid?" Or whatever. It's like, slow down. Like, he actually knows what he's talking about, and you're not out here saying, "Oh, everybody needs to be in a factory," but it is, what about the guys that aren't lawyers that aren't going to Ivy League schools and so on. Like, what are they doing? And what can they do? So
Yeah, I think that's I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I guess so much of my circle is those guys, and I sometimes forget. But like, um, there's a lot of people in Middle America who don't have that. I think of it as like a coastal dream, but maybe that's not right. But they just simply don't want that. They don't want
yeah,
office jobs. Um, but I can promise you um, that they're very intelligent, and I don't say that like lightly. I say that very, very seriously. They are very intelligent people.
yeah,
Um, what what do they want to do with themselves? What is a good option for a kid who has two um, working class parents who can only afford community college, um, but he knows he's as smart as that kid who just got the ABC scholarship and whose parents are sending him to Harvard? What is that kid's option?
yeah,
Um, and I think maybe because you brought up the Greer post, one thing I got good feedback on from that was with some help from mutual over in Indiana is just explaining to people, because people don't know the level of skilled labor that's inside a modern factory.
okay,
And if I just were to rattle a few off the top of my head, we're actually looking for a controls engineer right now. So a controls engineer, maybe this. I'm not sure. Maybe if your listeners are unfamiliar, it's kind of like a cross between your programming control systems for functions in the factory. Turn this pump on when the temperature of this thing hits 100 degrees.
mm-hmm.
Run this conveyor at this speed, and if this sensor gives you an error, then shut this conveyor down. So
Yeah,
modern controls in factories are like the they just have to work, right? Like they
yeah,
have to work. Um, and but you can't really go to school to get a controls engineering degree. There's a little cabal of controls company, and they all have their
yeah,
different programming secrets. But
yeah,
the bottom line is, you only get to know those secrets if you go either take their training or figure it out the hard way. And so you're not limited on some diploma, right?
yeah,
And those are jobs. So if I were to just rattle off a few more operations, I say,
mm-hmm.
how much material are we going to need next month? How much material are we going to need today? Am I rotating my inventory? Kind of just that like day-to-day purchasing and planning.
Right,
We make rebar, so the concrete demand is pretty seasonal. There's a ramp up and a ramp down every year, and you got to be watching so that you're when you're ramping, like this time of year for us, right? We're ramping up. Well,
mm-hmm.
I only have so many receivables coming in from February. There's not a whole lot of concrete getting poured, so I only have so much receivables coming in for dollars. But all of a sudden, I need a 2x my production next month. So how do
Yeah,
that's my job, right? That's the game. That's the game I play. Don't
mm-hmm.
need a degree for that. I have a degree, but it's not relevant at all to what I do.
Yeah,
And then you have facilities guys, which depending on what kind of equipment you're running, again, that's really, you need those guys. You have to pay them good, but
mm-hmm.
there's no degree for rebar machines, right? You only figure that out once you get in the door. And
Yeah,
and so there's a lot of skilled labor in a modern factory, a lot of well-paid skilled labor.
mm-hmm.
And I think those jobs are prime jobs for kids who might not want to be lawyers or doctors, but are
Well,
still very smart.
and the other part to it too is a lot of guys in those circles will get spicier than other circles about what needs to be going on and the demographics in the U.S. And so then it's like, okay, like if you're going to go this route, then you also have to know that industry will have to ramp up here in the States, and you're going to have to fill those places with qualified candidates, and you're going to have to make sure that that is uh, I mean, a, a young man's going to have to deal with stigma with whatever. Like he's going to have to make good decisions regardless. But yeah, if his parents aren't ignorant of the fact that he can be an engineer 2 years out from high school, making $50,000 to $60,000 a year, working in a manufacturing industry, working in potentially working on the docks or wherever, up on the lakes or down there. Oh, where's the main one? Anyway, down in the Gulf of America running. Well, I had a buddy running barges on Mississippi. Uh, you know, as long as they know about these other jobs and are able to get in them, it boggles my mind that there is a pushback. I can understand to some degree the idea that, we need right wing intellectual leaders. Like, okay, fine.
Right.
But for your right wing utopia, you're going to need laborers, and you're going to need manufacturing, and you're going to need something beyond just the grand idea.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really like your point about people being aware, literally just that simple, right? Like being aware that these are out there. I won't completely dox myself on my age and stuff, but I feel like 10 years ago ish uh, was probably seems like the worst time for the era of go to college. I went to college. Like if you were a smart kid, literally nothing else was presented to you. Yeah, literally, I don't ever like no one from a trade school ever came to our school.
Yep.
Ever. Let alone, and I think trades is one thing, but then I think what you're talking about is a good second layer is dock workers, right? There's no dock worker school. Oil field guys. One of our so we have three mechanical engineers on staff. Only one of them has a college degree, and this speaks to the mentality of our CEO. Before that, one of them worked in the oil field, and the other one was a spray foam tech, right? Spray foaming houses.
Yeah.
But especially the oil field guy, right? We use a lot of liquid in our process, and so there's a lot of pumps, there's a lot of valves, there's a lot of injection this and gaskets, and what better asset to have than a guy that worked in the oil field, right? So these dock workers, these oil field workers, whatever, like that's, and by the way, he was making amazing, I'm sure it's a little bit tapped now, but he was in North Dakota when the big got paid. More than a lawyer, more than a doctor, right? So,
well, it was like the contractors during OIF and OEF and all that. So there were some wild times there for a second. Yeah. Well, good. So I know you got kids. I don't want to take up too much time. Where can folks find you online, and I don't know, what should they be taking away? If I had to guess right now, I mean, most of the guys that tune in are probably late 20s to mid 30s. So for some of them, it's even a question of like, Why do I care at this point? I'm 60 G's into either into college debt, or I've got a job with 60 grand a year. So what's the big deal in manufacturing?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and I don't know that I've ever um, asked that in that way. So I would say that um, if you're like 60 grand in 6 years and into being an accountant or whatever, um, and you like it, stay with it, right? If you think there's something more that you want, something more, um, part of manufacturing that I think is not talked about enough is the most jobs is actually the flexibility. And
Yep.
maybe I have a slightly different definition of flexibility than someone that works from home. But in there from 8 to 5 actually gives me some options, right? I've worked jobs in the past that are much longer hours, and to know that from 8 to 5 you have a paycheck that's going to sustain you, you're going to be fulfilled
Yeah.
personally. Hopefully, I mean, probably not always, but
Yeah.
fulfilled personally with what you're doing. You're making a product that people are going to build their houses with, or building bridges with for your community, or what, that's us, right? But whereas if you're a marketing manager or an accountant or something, there might be a little bit more disconnect. And I think probably for that level of guy, for that 30-year-old that's an accountant or whatever, you can walk into a factory within a year. You could probably be making the same as you're making now. You'll be a lot more fulfilled. I would argue that you're doing a lot more for your countrymen. Maybe that's probably a little bit more of an opinion, but that's my opinion. And
Yeah.
and if someone is working one of those, it was tough, right? But at we're pretty far north, so I could get to the farm in the morning if I needed to, do a little bit of work, go to my day job, have my guaranteed paycheck, get home, eat supper with my family, go back to the farm, do more work. I think personally, I guess I'm of the opinion manufacturing is kind of flexible in that way. If you're only at 8 to 10 hours a day, that leaves you with some daylight. And if you want to pursue a side hustle, especially in agriculture, I think that actually manufacturing is kind of a good partner to have with that side hustle, because you're really, in the grand scheme, you're really not 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day. You have some sunlight, right? You have daylight to work.
Yep.
That's what I did basically all summer. During planting season last year, I would go up in the morning, ride a tractor for a little bit, go to work, come back, go back up there again. Whereas, before, when I first graduated, I was working in forestry and natural resources. And, that job, I would wake up, be on the road, headed to the office by 5:30, drive another hour once I got to the office in the work truck, be in the woods all day, drive the other extra hour back home, back to the office, and then another hour back home. It was really common for me to be gone from 5:30 to 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So when you compare 8 hours to 13 hours, to me, it's a big upgrade, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and I think you hit on things there too. Like everybody at the factory, they want off just as bad as you. Now you need to put in a good day's work, but they want off at the same time as you, and you just wash your hands. You leave it there every night.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to carry anything home. You're not getting called in on the weekend. You just work, you go home, you do your thing, and you go back. And like you said, you're not on top of that. You're not working at a job that's so far into the city that you can't afford to be close to it or anything else. It's just well, among other things, it's more conducive to having families and living the life
Yeah.
that I expect most men want. And so that's not to deny the Greers or the lawyers or anything else, but there has to be something there for for the everyman on
Yeah.
top of for the elite. So
Yeah. And the other thing that you brought up Greer one more time, and that's kind of, I don't want to, I do understand his point, actually. I got
yeah,
kind
I
of,
think he
I
has
got kind of
he
fired with him, but I understand it.
yeah.
But there's probably guys like me and you who are, I guess this is where I wanted to go with that, is in that same circle of people, um, you know, are guys that make a big deal of the money they make and the car they
Yeah.
house they live in. Don't care, couldn't care, own a new vehicle in my life. But when I guess what I wanted to say here is, yeah, I have an awesome wife, and the other thing that we've been able to do because of that is she doesn't work; she gets to stay home, and we, yeah,
That's huge.
we do not make like a lot of money by any standard anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But we live in a small house, we drive used cars, and so you often hear this rhetoric that like, oh, if people romanticize days gone by. You can never live the lifestyle of the 1950s because no one would ever live in a small house or have one
Yeah.
vehicle or whatever. I think, um, despite what you might hear online, there is actually a lot of people doing it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Brag, I mean it to say that, like, if you're a guy
Well,
that if you're the kind of guy that doesn't care, don't get caught up in the fact that people say I make six figures and I drive a new F-150, and
mhm.
I would never live that way, because there's plenty of people that are happy living that way in that way. And a lot of people in our
Yeah.
community live that way, and so I mean that as a you know as a as a if you're a young guy, don't get caught up in the sauce, right? Like, um, it's still a very good life.
Yeah. And there is definitely, I mean, between the suburbs and I think I haven't looked at the numbers in a while. I do think that's where the majority of kids are still raised, is the suburbs, and so the life is still out there whether you're exposed to it or not. That's somehow or another we got wrapped into the idea that, oh, that's the drug lands and everybody's on fentanyl or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know people who ended up ODing on pain meds or whatever, but they were living in the suburbs too.
Yeah,
There is a good life to be had just outside of town, just a touch, you know. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. That's fine too.
right.
But yeah, I think unfortunately there is a lack of exposure in general these days to a lot of that. So yeah, good stuff.
I don't think about too much is, I live, growing up, I lived, I guess, rural, and now I live in
Mhm.
I don't even know what this is considered, like a village probably or something, but
Yeah,
like villages, like literal small towns, but not suburbs. Like you see town. To me, those are the best places to get
hmm,
started as a young person, because housing is relatively
yeah,
cheap. There's still some stuff around for you to go to as a family, stores to go to, um,
hmm,
and nothing's going to be egregious. Little 1,000 people towns,
yeah,
5,000 people towns. That's kind of where I see the easiest path to getting started for a young person. If you try and go right away
yeah,
into the big suburb with the label, right, is work,
yeah.
right, you know, for most
Uh-huh.
people. Um, but don't but don't get caught up in the sauce of like Scott Greer said, I have to drive a BMW and be a liar.
By the time you're 28, you loser.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But all right, good stuff. Well, yes.
Well, good stuff, man.
So I appreciate it, everybody. You can jump on X. You can find him now. What is it? Is it Rust Belt 1? Let's see. Rust Belt
Yeah, it's
Kid
Rust
1.
Belt Kid 1.
There we go.
Somebody had Rust Belt Kid already, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So I'll have that link in the description and all that. But you can follow him. It's good stuff, you know. And a big thing I appreciate. This is gonna sound really homo, but no, it's all super positive, and it's hey, like quit being depressed. You can do this.
Well, good. I'm glad. I know sometimes, especially with tariffs, I get a little bit worked up, but no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you holding down the fort for 30 minutes, but for my delay, and yeah, this is a good chat. I'm gonna start asking you more questions. I didn't know that we had operations that were so similar, so I'll probably ask you some more questions offline.
Yeah, that'd be fine. And actually, if you wanna stay online for just a second, I'm gonna kill the stream and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.